Now for GTN Coaches Corner, your chance to treat us like your own personal coaches. Send in your questions using the hashtag GTN Coaches Corner. You can leave those in the comments section down below this video and below any video. We've got years of triathlon experience and coaching qualifications. We've made many faux pas ourselves, so you can learn from our own errors. So let's dive straight into this. Some great questions this week from F. Kim. They've asked, I have my eyes set on a few running events throughout the year. However, some fall relatively close to each other in terms of the date. One is a 10K fun run event the day before a half marathon, and another a second half marathon 2 weeks before a full marathon. I'm wondering how much time you'd recommend leaving in between races before attempting another. I can probably let go of the 10K fun run, but I'm just keen to get your thoughts on the topic in general.
Well, it sounds like you suffer mostly from FOMO and you want to enter everything. You can't do everything, let's be honest. There's lots of races every weekend. You can't do races every weekend. I mean, you can, but then your performance in all of those is going to suffer. It very much depends on what your priorities are here. If running a PB in the marathon is your priority, then doing a half marathon 2 weeks before it is probably not going to set you up for that PB. But if the half marathon is your priority and then you're just going to, once you're recovered, run the marathon just to get through the distance, absolutely go ahead and do it. Similarly, for that half marathon and 10K on the same weekend, which is almost never advisable. If the 10K is your priority and you want to run a PB in it, and then the following day on tired legs, just go around with your mates and run a half marathon, go ahead. If you're looking at running a PB in that half marathon, even if you run it really slowly, that 10K is not going to help you run that PB in the half marathon the following day. You want to be resting up at most doing a very short jog the day before a half marathon attempt. So it all depends on what your priorities are here. But the reality is you can't do everything, so choose what's most important to you.
Yeah, now forgive me for treating like a school kid here, but the best thing to do is literally listing out the races, maybe jotting it down on a piece of paper or an Excel spreadsheet, whatever you like, and literally saying A race, B race, C race, and maybe even putting it into a calendar. I've quite often enjoyed doing that with some of my athletes in the past, and you can quite clearly then see the space, the number of weeks between each of the events, and start planning out the season or the race calendar and realizing maybe where some of those issues may arise.
Yeah, you can use races as training, absolutely. And if you want to be part of it, then go ahead. But you have to be very smart with those, because you can ruin days, weeks, even months of training by going too hard in a race that you were not prepared for just because you lined up because your mates were doing it. So be careful what you do and plan your whole season smartly.
Now, in terms of the training itself, and this is relatively general depending on the event you're targeting, you can use some of these races just simply, as James said, as training, but the real focus being on, say, that half marathon or that marathon, and therefore just using the 10K, a little bit of speed prep, and just actually still focusing all your training towards the half marathon rather than jumping around with your training and trying to hit all of them and do a bit of training for each. You should really focus on one being the priority in your training, the sessions focused around that, and then trying to get by to an extent on the others.
Structured season plan is what we're going for. Thanks for the question though, F. Kim. Our next question is from Kit Schofield. It says, do you have any tips for swim sessions when the pool doesn't allow any equipment? As a former swimmer, this lack of variety with doing 90% crawl without any equipment isn't super motivating. Thanks. Well, that is frustrating. If you are not allowed any toys whatsoever, no paddles, no kickboards, no pull buoys, that's very frustrating. I mean, I would not enjoy that. I mean, I don't enjoy swimming at the best of times, but I would really not enjoy it if they took my pull buoy away from me.
I come from a swimming background, and I will also agree, swimming is pretty monotonous even at the best of times. So actually having no toys or equipment can make that even worse. Of course, don't forget you do have 3 other strokes to pick from. Maybe you don't enjoy all of them, but they are great training aids. So butterfly, backstroke, breaststroke, as well as freestyle or front crawl. Also, you can kind of still do a lot of these drills without training aids. So for instance, you don't need training aids to be able to do some of these drills or technique work. For instance, kicking, you don't necessarily need a kickboard to do kick work. You can lay out on your side and do just kick work lying on your side. The same if you're trying to really isolate the arms, you could do some butterfly work instead, breaststroke work without using your legs. You could even put a band around your ankles. So a really small piece of equipment. Yeah, maybe don't do it whilst the lifeguards are looking. I hate it doing band work. But anyway, yeah, just being creative with it and just really trying to isolate those movements.
Yeah, it is frustrating. I would also say that it's very important to go to these sessions with a session plan. You need to have it mapped out exactly what you're going to do with the rest intervals and the intervals in between, so that you can just do it and keep going. That is a big difference when it comes to swimming. If you get in and go, right, I got 45 minutes, I'm going to swim for 45 minutes, I'll stop when I feel like stopping and swim when I feel like swimming. The time will really, really drag. But if you jump in and you've got 8 25s and then some drills and then 10 100s and then some more drills, etc., before you know it, the session's done and 45 minutes has easily gone. So build a session that you can hop in and takes into account the fact that you can't use any toys. And like Mark says, don't be afraid of those other strokes. They might not feel like it, but all of them use very similar movements under the water, and they all train your freestyle swimming.
Yeah, I think as triathletes, we quite often avoid them because we only have to do freestyle in a triathlon, but they're definitely beneficial. Next swimming related question from Rebecca Hewson. Do you have any tips on what to do if you get foot or calf cramp during an open water swim? I try to keep on top of my hydration and electrolyte intake, but I do still get cramps sometimes when training in a pool and I have to stop and stretch immediately. I'm terrified of it happening when I'm in the open water or during a race. Any thoughts on how to deal with it? Well, first off, you're not alone. A lot of people struggle from this, and actually I, for quite a period of time, really struggled with this, and it actually did come on during a lot of races, and it pretty much was race over for me at the time, because I'd feel the twitching in the arch of my foot, and then that would go into a full cramp, and I'm sort of trying to kick along, trying to stretch out my foot, and then it would just go into my leg. What I found for myself, a lot of it was, yes, down to the electrolyte intake and making sure I was on top of that the days prior to the event, not just simply on the day. And then also, it was just down to potentially the fatigue and use of those muscles, or like the foot muscles or the lower leg. I was particularly finding that I was getting that cramp in my foot or my calf if I'd been running just before swimming. So I started to avoid that, and it all sort of ironed itself out.
There's a lot of things that cause cramps, and we can't really sit here and tell you exactly what's causing yours. But generally with lower leg cramps when you're swimming, it's not so much overuse, because let's face it, you don't use your lower legs that much. And it's often not so much electrolytes and stuff, because it often happens, you'll notice, in the first 100 meters of the swim, you haven't really gone into any kind of depletion. What it is often is holding your foot in a position that it's not used to or comfortable. You're essentially holding your calf in a very shortened position, which is not something you do unless you walk around and stand at your desk or on your tiptoes. You're never going to hold your calf in that position except when you swim, and your calf's not used to that. So what you can do to prevent it is to start training that. Now, I'm not saying walk around on your tiptoes, but do kick sets in the swimming pool. Get those lower legs used to having your toes in a pointed position, your arch of your foot in a slightly bent position with no resistance, because that's not a natural position out on dry land, but it is the position you have to hold it on when you're swimming. And if you get used to that, you might find that these calf cramps and lower leg cramps that you get when you're swimming, holding your foot in that unnatural position almost, will go away. So yeah, that would be my advice on this matter. Lots of things cause cramps though, and we can't really tell you what is specifically causing yours, but I would start there.
Yeah, and doing the electrolyte thing and everything, there's no harm in doing that. It's definitely a good
You should be doing that anyway, even if you don't get cramps leading up to a race.
Right, final couple of questions, actually from the same person, from John Stoltenberg. So first one, do you guys have any gear strategy tips for riding into the different directions of strong winds? The second question, whenever I ride over 25 miles, my feet go numb. Because of this, I tend to unclip for a minute every 20 miles or so. How do triathletes go for 112 miles without unclipping, or do they? What is it that I can do to ease the numbing? Well, first off, let's address that first question, because that is quite an interesting one, about riding into the wind, how you apply the power, pacing, etc., etc. Interestingly, we've got a video coming up on that literally this week, so stay tuned for that. We've got a bit of an in-depth talk through that.
GTN is clairvoyant. We always know what your questions are going to be before you. We've already filmed that video and it's coming out this week. Yeah, it is coming out and we are going to address all those questions. But right now, we will say there is specific ways you can tackle the wind. You really want to be working round about your maximum into the wind. When you go in your slowest, it feels really slow and it feels demotivating. It feels like you're not going anywhere. So you're almost tempted to just sit up and go really slow. But that is actually where you're going to make the most gains. So get down into your aero bars, hold that power around about where you want it to stay for your whole ride. Don't go stupidly hard and really push hard into the wind, but also don't go really easy, because that's when you get the most advantages when you're fighting those winds. When you go in with a tailwind, take advantage of the fact that there's a tailwind, but again, don't push really, really hard just to get a few extra kilometers an hour. It might feel amazing to go that fast, but you're just wasting energy, because all you're really doing is increasing the amount of air resistance when you've really got a tailwind, so you've got minimal air resistance.
As we say, this is all explained in the video, but hopefully that helps in the meantime. The next question, obviously asking about the numbness in the feet and the fact that they're needing to unclip every 20 miles or so.
Just ride 24 miles from now on.
Yeah, maybe not. One of the main issues with this, and I've experienced it before, is actually just the fit of the shoes. So a lot of people experience this because obviously as we exercise, our feet get warmer and they start to expand. And if your shoes aren't fitting incorrectly, we can start to squeeze the toes, and that's where we start to get the numbness. So yeah, first port of call is probably that one.
Yeah, cycle shoes are very unforgiving when it comes to your foot shape and your foot position, whereas running shoes, there's quite a margin for error. They've soft uppers, so your foot can push outwards if it needs to. Cycling shoes are pretty firm and stiff, and if your shoe is too narrow, for example, all your metatarsals are going to be pushed together. You're going to get a nerve trapped or blood vessels trapped, and you're going to get numb feet. So you got to make sure you got the right shoes for you. That is definitely the first thing. If you can, maybe try some wider shoes or some slightly bigger shoes with a bit more space, and then also try not tightening them so much. It is tempting to really crank those boas and make them so that you've got a really stable base, but you don't want them too tight that obviously you're getting some numbness. The other thing to look at is actually your position above the pedal. If you push your shoe a little bit further forward or a little bit further back over that pedal spindle, you could find it makes all the difference. You may find that there's a particular hotspot where you're essentially pushing down on one of those metatarsals and it's blocking a blood vessel or a nerve, making the numbness come on. And if you move even by 0.5 centimeter your cleat further forward or back on the bottom of the shoe, it can make all the difference and all your problems will be solved. Just remember though, if you do adjust your cleat position, your pedal position forward or back, you actually probably need to adjust your saddle also, because that's essentially changing the length of your leg.
Yeah, also just bear in mind, I mean, you may see all these pro cyclists out there wearing certain shoes and you think, well, if it works for them, it must work for me. It is a bit like running shoes. It is very specific and individual. I mean, hope you guys have enjoyed today's video. If so, please do give that thumbs up, give it a like. Don't forget to send in more questions using the hashtag GTN Coaches Corner. We'll see you again next time.